Have you ever wondered what happens to a queen after the king is dead? When the throne is gone and the enemy holds the palace, does she escape? Does she become a prisoner? Or does she face the executioner? Across history, the answers have been brutal and very, very real. In medieval Europe, the queen's fate after a kingdom's fall depended entirely on the conqueror's will. When Edward II of England was deposed in 1327, his wife, Queen Isabella, ironically the one who plotted against him, briefly ruled as regent. But when political tides turned, she herself was placed under house arrest for life, stripped of real power. Not all queens were so lucky. When Richard III was defeated at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, his queen, Anne Neville, had already died. But the women of his family faced humiliation and political isolation. The Tudors saw them as potential threats, because any surviving royal woman could become a rallying point for rebellion. In many sieges, queens were paraded through the streets as trophies, locked in convents, or forced to marry their conqueror to legitimize his claim to the throne. The crown was more than gold. It was a political weapon. In the Byzantine Empire, losing power didn't mean exile to a foreign land. It meant a life of gilded captivity. When Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes was defeated by the Seljuks in 1071 and later blinded, his wife, Eudokia Macrombolitissa, was forced into a monastery. The Byzantine elite preferred to neutralize royal women by removing them from politics, but in silk robes instead of rags. Yet some survived defeat with cunning. The Empress Irene of Athens, originally a political hostage, was deposed in 802, yet allowed to live under guarded luxury until her death. Proof that survival often meant surrendering all ambition. The Mongol invasions of the 13th century were especially brutal for fallen royalty. When the Mongols conquered the Khwarezmian Empire in 1220, they executed most of the royal family. The queen, Turkin Khatun, once one of the most powerful women in Central Asia, fled to the Caspian Sea but was captured. Accounts say she was sent to Mongolia as a hostage, where she died in obscurity, her empire erased from history. The Mongols believed in eliminating all possible heirs to prevent uprisings. For many queens, this meant public execution or forced marriage into Mongol nobility to wipe out their dynastic identity. In the Mughal Empire, royal women after a ruler's fall were often confined to the zenana, the women's quarters, under strict guard. When Emperor Humayun was overthrown in 1540 by Sher Shah Suri, his queen, Hamida Banu Begum, fled with him into exile, wandering through hostile territories while pregnant. Many royal women faced the same choice: flee into danger or remain and risk captivity. Centuries later, when the British crushed the Indian Rebellion of 1857, Begum Zinat Mahal, wife of the last Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah II, was exiled to Burma with her husband. In Imperial China, the fall of a dynasty often meant mass executions of the imperial household. When the Han dynasty collapsed in 220 CE, many palace women were forced to commit suicide. This honorable death prevented them from being captured by enemies, but it was still a forced end. During the fall of the Ming dynasty in 1644, Emperor Chonzhen's empress, Zhao, hanged herself as rebel forces stormed the capital. Conquering dynasties sometimes kept surviving imperial women as concubines, not as respect, but as a way to erase the old dynasty's bloodline and strengthen their own. In the Ottoman Empire, royal women were rarely killed outright, but they were politically erased. Queens, often valide sultans, mothers of the reigning sultan, could wield immense power. But when a new sultan came to the throne, women from the previous reign were exiled to the old palace, where they lived under guard for the rest of their lives. Male relatives of the old sultan often faced the infamous fratricide tradition, silk cord strangulation to prevent civil war. For the women, survival meant a quiet life in a golden cage, cut off from the political world. When Louis XVI was executed in 1793, his queen, Marie Antoinette, was already a prisoner in the conciergerie. She endured months of isolation and interrogations before facing the guillotine. Her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth, met the same fate. The surviving royal children were imprisoned. The young Dauphin, Louis Charles, died at just 10 years old in captivity. Revolutions rarely spared queens. To the people, they weren't just wives of kings. They were symbols of everything the revolution sought to destroy. In 1917, the Russian Empire collapsed in revolution. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, and his wife Alexandra Feodorovna, along with their 5 children, were placed under house arrest. In July 1918, the entire Romanov family was executed by Bolshevik forces in the basement of the Ipatiev house. For the new regime, leaving even one royal alive risked a counter-revolution. The fall of the throne meant the total erasure of the dynasty. In African kingdoms, the fate of queens varied. When the Kingdom of Benin fell to British forces in 1897, the Oba's wives and female relatives were taken as captives. Some were forced into foreign households, others were about resources, stripped of ceremonial roles. In Zulu history, after the defeat of King Cetshwayo in 1879, royal women were sometimes married to rival chiefs as a way to prevent rebellion, turning them into pawns in new power structures. From Europe's castles to China's forbidden city, from Ottoman harems to Mughal palaces, the pattern is clear. If the queen was politically useful, she might be married off to the conqueror or kept alive as a bargaining tool. If she was dangerous, she faced confinement, forced suicide, or execution. If she was powerless, she simply faded away, alive but erased from the record. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.